There's a difference between being vulnerable and being emotionally naked too early in a relationship. Sharing your deepest insecurities with a man before there's emotional safety, trust, and a deep bond can work against you more than you realize. It's natural to want to be transparent, to feel seen, and to be understood. In fact, many women have been taught that openness is the foundation of love. While honesty is essential in a healthy relationship, there's a level of self-disclosure that, if given too soon or without discernment, can shift the dynamic in a way that undermines connection rather than building it. When you share your deepest insecurities, your fears of not being good enough, of being abandoned, of not being lovable, of being too much or not enough, it can create emotional pressure that the man is not prepared to carry. Especially early on, when he's still discovering who you are, when he's evaluating how he feels around you, or when he hasn't yet developed the emotional commitment that makes him want to protect your heart. Too much vulnerability can feel heavy. Not because your emotions are wrong or burdensome, but because intimacy requires pacing. Just as you don't build a house by dumping all the materials on the ground at once, you don't build emotional intimacy by opening every door at once. When a woman reveals her deepest insecurities without emotional grounding, it can send a subconscious message that she doesn't fully believe in her own worth, that she's looking for validation from him, that her sense of self depends on his reaction, and when that happens, the dynamic subtly shifts. Instead of being drawn in by her confidence and emotional maturity, he may feel like he's now responsible for holding her together. It's not his job to fix you, reassure you constantly, or be the source of your self-esteem. That's work you have to do on your own, and ironically, the more you do it, the more you man will be drawn to you, not because you need him to feel whole, but because you are whole already. That doesn't mean you should pretend to be perfect. In fact, healthy men are not attracted to perfection. They're attracted to authenticity. But authenticity doesn't mean handing someone your emotional scars and saying, "Here, hold these for me." It means knowing who you are, owning your story, and showing up with emotional self-awareness. It means being able to say, "Yes, I've struggled with this part of myself, but I've worked through it, and I continue to grow." That's the kind of emotional intelligence that draws in a man who is emotionally available and ready for real partnership. When you hold your deepest insecurities in the early stages of a relationship, you're not being fake, you're being wise. You're giving yourself the chance to observe the man. Does he create emotional safety? Is he consistent, kind, and respectful? Does he handle conflict with maturity? Is he generous with his time and attention? Or does he retreat when things get vulnerable? These are questions you can't answer in the first few dates. But your insecurities, when shared prematurely, can bond you too quickly to someone who hasn't shown you they're safe yet. And then, instead of evaluating him clearly, your emotional investment can cloud your judgment. There's also an element of mystery that keeps attraction alive. When you reveal everything at once, you take away the natural unfolding that creates curiosity, interest, and emotional progression. A woman who knows her worth doesn't need to overshare in order to be accepted. She allows herself to be seen over time. She gives a man space to discover her heart piece by piece. That doesn't mean playing games. It means honoring your emotional depth as something sacred, not something you give away to everyone, but something you share with someone who's proven themselves worthy of it. Some women overshare because they're testing the man. If I show him my worst and he stays, then he must really care. But real connection doesn't work that way. Love isn't proven by enduring emotional chaos. It's proven by consistent behavior, mutual respect, shared values, and a gradual deepening of emotional connection. A man doesn't fall in love because he sees how broken you are. He falls in love because he sees how beautifully you've healed, how resilient you are, and how you carry yourself with grace even when life hasn't been easy. You are allowed to have insecurities. You are human, but those insecurities don't define you, and they don't need to be given voice in every relationship. Save them for the man who has earned your trust, not the one who's just entered your world. You don't need to be fully known by everyone to be deeply loved by the right one. Bringing up other men, especially exes, in conversations with the man you're currently seeing can erode the very foundation you're trying to build. While it may feel innocent or even honest to mention your past experiences or make comparisons, the emotional message it sends is far more powerful than you may realize. Men, especially those who are emotionally invested, want to feel like they are unique in your eyes, that they matter to you in a way no one else does. When you start comparing them to someone you used to date, whether you're criticizing the ex or praising him, you plant a seed of doubt in your current partner's mind that can grow into insecurity, distance, or even resentment. One of the core needs for a man in a relationship is to feel that he's your hero, not because you're weak, but because he wants to know he has a unique and meaningful role in your life. When you say things like, "My ex used to take me here," or "You're so much better than my last boyfriend," or even "You remind me of someone I used to date," it immediately makes your current partner feel like he's being measured against someone from your past. No matter how you frame it, it pulls him out of the present moment and into a mental competition with someone he never asked to be compared to. Even worse, when a man feels like he's being compared, it can trigger his ego and make him question whether he's really enough for you. It's not that he doesn't want to hear about your life. He probably does. But there's a difference between sharing life experiences and making someone feel like they're being stacked up against someone else. The emotional energy of comparison communicates, "You're good, but I've seen better," or "Let's see if you can match what I've had before." That kind of energy doesn't foster trust, connection, or emotional intimacy. It creates a performance-based relationship dynamic where he feels like he has to prove himself rather than be himself. Sometimes women bring up exes because they're trying to show how far they've come or what they've learned. That's a valid intention. Growth is worth celebrating. But if that growth story includes too many details about your past relationships, it can derail the focus from who you are now and what you want to build in the future. You don't owe a man your full romantic history, and being emotionally intelligent means knowing which parts of your story uplift the relationship and which parts quietly undermine it. There's power in selective sharing. There's wisdom in knowing when something adds value and when it adds weight. Another trap is bringing up how other men treated you to test the new man or to subtly let him know your standards. For example, saying things like, "My ex never made time for me, so I hope you won't be the same," might feel like setting a boundary, but it actually puts the new man in a defensive posture. Instead of being motivated by connection, he's now trying to avoid failing a test. And in doing that, he may lose the freedom to be himself, to show up authentically, and to express his own rhythm in the relationship. He's no longer relating to you as a unique woman. He's now reacting to the ghost of someone who came before him. Even if the comparison seems flattering, like telling your current partner he's more thoughtful, more attractive, more reliable than your ex, it still ties his value to someone else's standard. True connection happens when both people feel seen for who they are, not who they are in comparison to someone else. A man who values himself doesn't want to be better than your ex. He wants to be deeply connected to you. And if he senses that part of your heart is still engaged with someone else, even just mentally, it can make him pull away emotionally or even physically. It's also worth noting that constantly referencing your past relationship experiences can signal unresolved emotional baggage. It suggests that you may still be processing or healing, even if you claim to have moved on. And emotionally available men who are looking for a real partnership can pick up on that quickly. They want to know that your heart is free, open, and present, not stuck in a loop of comparing the past to the present. They want to feel that they have a clean slate with you, not a role in a recurring story you haven't fully released. Respecting your current relationship means giving it the space to be its own story. It's not about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about protecting the intimacy of the present moment by not allowing the shadows of your previous relationships to influence how you see or treat the man in front of you. When you choose to see your current partner with fresh eyes, to engage with him based on who he is rather than how he measures up to someone else, you allow real emotional connection to grow. And in doing so, you create a space where both of you feel valued, chosen, and safe to be your fullest selves without the weight of comparison. Trust is a sacred currency in any relationship, not just romantic ones, but especially among close friends and family. When someone confides in you, when they open up about their struggles, their mistakes, their private feelings, they're handing you something fragile and deeply personal. That kind of trust is not something to casually pass along, even to a man you're dating or in a relationship with. There's a difference between sharing your own experiences and using someone else's life as conversation material. When you reveal your friends' or family's secrets to a man, even if it's framed as a harmless story or done with no bad intention, it sends a powerful message about your boundaries, your loyalty, and your emotional discretion. Men, pay attention to what you say about others, especially the people closest to you. If you're quick to reveal a sister's marital problems, a friend's personal failures, or a relative's struggles with mental health or finances, he may be listening closely, not just to the story, but to what it implies about you. The underlying message is, if you're willing to share someone else's private life so freely, you might do the same with his. Even if he doesn't say it out loud, he may begin to wonder whether you'd talk about his weaknesses, vulnerabilities, or intimate details with your inner circle just as easily, and that fear can plant a seed of emotional distance. A healthy relationship is built on emotional safety, knowing that what's shared stays protected, that privacy is honored, and that the bond between two people isn't open to outside exposure. When a man sees that you are a vault when it comes to the sensitive details of others' lives, it earns his respect. It signals maturity, trustworthiness, and deep character. On the other hand, being loose-lipped about what others have trusted you with can give the impression that you lack discernment, or worse, that you use secrets to gain attention or maintain interest. That's not the energy that cultivates deep emotional connection. It's the kind that keeps relationships shallow or breaks trust before it's even had the chance to grow. It's understandable to want to connect with a man by sharing stories. Sometimes in the flow of conversation, especially in emotionally intense moments, you might feel compelled to talk about someone else's situation that mirrors your own. Maybe you want to explain where your values come from or how certain life lessons shaped you, and the easiest way to do that is by using a friend's or relative's story as an example. But even then, you have to ask yourself, is this story mine to tell? Is there a way I can communicate my truth without exposing someone else's? Part of emotional intelligence is knowing where your experience ends and someone else's begins. You can share your reactions, your insights, your feelings, but you don't need to lay bare someone else's private struggles to do that. When you show a man that you respect the emotional boundaries of others, it gives him confidence that you'll do the same with him. It tells him that you are someone who can be trusted, not just because you keep secrets, but because you honor the weight of someone's vulnerability. There's also a subtle danger in using someone else's story to bond with a man because it can create a false sense of intimacy. It may feel like a deep conversation, but if it's based on details that were never yours to share, the foundation is shaky. True intimacy doesn't come from revealing scandal or drama. It comes from emotional presence, consistency, and the ability to connect without compromising your integrity. A woman who protects what has been entrusted to her carries a quiet power that doesn't need validation. She becomes someone a man can not only love but deeply respect. Being the guardian of others' secrets is part of being a hive. You woman. It reflects emotional discipline and maturity. It shows that you are not led by impulse or gossip, but guided by principle. And that kind of woman is magnetic. because she brings a sense of stability, security, and emotional depth that invites real connection. A man may enjoy the thrill of juicy details for a moment, but he will stay and invest when he feels safe, respected, and honored. And that begins with how you handle what others have entrusted to you. Your relationships with your friends and family deserve the same protection you would want for your own heart. If you wouldn't want your personal struggles shared with someone you barely know, don't assume others would feel differently. When you draw that boundary with strength and clarity, you show that you understand the value of trust, and that makes you a woman who naturally commands it in every room you walk into. There's a common belief that full transparency is the foundation of a strong relationship, that in order to build trust, you have to lay everything on the table, no matter how painful, embarrassing, or complicated your past may be. While honesty is essential, there's a difference between being truthful and being overexposed. Sharing every detail of your past with a man, especially early in the relationship, can create more confusion than clarity, more pressure than intimacy. You are not obligated to narrate every chapter of your life in order to prove that you're trustworthy or worthy of love. In fact, doing so can sometimes backfire, especially when the emotional foundation of the relationship isn't yet solid enough to hold that kind of weight. Your past is part of you. It helped shape who you are, gave you the lessons that make you wise, and built the resilience you carry today. But it doesn't define your worth or determine how you should be treated now. You have the right to evolve. You have the right to let go of old versions of yourself. And you have the right to protect parts of your story that are no longer relevant to the woman you've become. Not because you're hiding, but because not every experience needs to be revisited, and not every person deserves access to the most vulnerable corners of your history. Men, especially those who are serious about relationships, aren't necessarily looking for a perfect woman with a flawless past. They're looking for a woman who is emotionally present and grounded. When you begin unloading every heartbreak, every mistake, every intimate detail of your life before him, it can overwhelm the natural progression of connection. He may not know what to do with that information. It might trigger his insecurities, his judgments, or even make him question whether he can measure up or meet your emotional needs. And in many cases, it simply takes the focus away from building a future together and keeps the energy tied to the past. It's important to remember that real intimacy grows in layers. Trust is built gradually, not all at once. Just because you've gone through difficult times or made decisions you wouldn't make now doesn't mean those moments need to be shared in vivid detail. You can acknowledge your growth, your healing, and your wisdom without diving into stories that reopen wounds or complicate the emotional landscape. Not because you're afraid of being seen, but because you honor your journey. You know that the most important story you can tell is the one you're writing today, not the one you had to survive years ago. There's also the reality that not everyone is emotionally equipped to hold your story. Some men may seem curious, even empathetic, but deep down they may not know how to process what you're telling them. They may say the right words, but internally it might affect how they view you. This isn't always intentional or malicious. It's just human nature. When people are still getting to know each other, they are forming impressions. If too much too soon comes into the conversation, it can distort how someone sees you. What could have been a meaningful bond built on shared experiences and mutual respect might turn into a relationship overshadowed by the past instead of focused on the present. Holding back every detail doesn't make you dishonest. It makes you discerning. It means you're emotionally intelligent enough to understand timing, context, and emotional capacity. You're not performing or pretending. You're choosing when and how to reveal the parts of your story that matter. And the truth is, the right man won't need to know everything at once to love you deeply. He'll want to understand your heart more than your history. He'll be more interested in how you carry yourself now, how you love, how you communicate, and how you dream. That's what draws a high-quality man in, your energy in the present, not the pages of your past. There will be a time when deeper sharing becomes appropriate, when the emotional safety has been earned, and when both of you are ready to explore each other's journeys with compassion and depth. That moment doesn't have to be rushed, and it doesn't need to come with guilt for holding back. A woman who honors her past doesn't owe it to anyone. She chooses who to trust with it, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. What matters most is that you own your story without being owned by it, that you walk forward with grace and self-respect, knowing that your past may have shaped you, but it doesn't have to be the lens through which every man sees you. In any romantic relationship, strategy plays a subtle yet powerful role. It's not manipulation or playing games. It's about self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and understanding timing, boundaries, and pacing. Every woman who has grown in love and self-respect knows that part of building a meaningful connection involves intention. You don't just show up and give everything away. You move with clarity. You observe. You respond, not react, but revealing these inner strategies, how you think through your next step, how you choose to handle conflict, how you decide when to pull back or lean in, is not something that needs to be discussed openly with the man you're seeing. Your strategy is your compass. It's not a conversation topic. When you make those strategic moves and then announce them, you dilute their power and shift the emotional dynamic in a way that can hurt the very relationship you're trying to build. A man wants to feel that the connection he has with you is organic. He wants to believe that your affection, your enthusiasm, your interest in him is coming from a genuine place, not from a calculated checklist or predetermined playbook. And while you may indeed be moving with purpose, revealing that you're holding back texts to see if he'll chase you, or that you're mirroring his energy to gauge his level of investment, can turn your interactions into something transactional. It stops feeling like romance and starts feeling like a negotiation. That's when emotional spontaneity dies, and without that spark, the chemistry that once pulled you together begins to fade. When you let a man into your behind-the-scenes thought process, you also risk shifting the power dynamics. If you tell him you're testing him, watching his behavior to determine if he meets your standards, or holding back vulnerability because it's part of your long-term approach to protecting your heart, he may begin to feel like a project. No one wants to feel like they're under a microscope being evaluated for performance. It makes him pull away, not because he doesn't want to rise to your level, but because it doesn't feel like he's being loved for who he is. It feels like he's being managed, measured, or subtly controlled. And even the most emotionally mature man can feel turned off when love stops feeling free and starts feeling like a strategy session. There's a difference between being in control of your emotions and being coldly analytical. A healthy woman knows how to self-regulate. She knows how to stay centered. She knows when to give space and when to show affection. She knows when to communicate directly and when to hold back. But she doesn't have to explain these moves. She lives them, she embodies them, because the power isn't in explaining the strategy. It's in becoming the woman who doesn't need to explain it. When you move with quiet strength, your actions speak louder than any plan ever could. That's the energy a hive, you man respects and responds to. Also, when you expose your strategic thinking, you open the door for a man to play the same game back. Suddenly, it's not about emotional truth. It's about who can outsmart who. You call less, so he calls less. You mirror, so he mirrors. Now both of you are just reacting to each other's moves instead of connecting from the heart. The entire relationship becomes a dance of ego, pride, and guardedness, instead of trust, warmth, and openness. And in that space, true intimacy can't grow. Strategic moves are meant to protect your peace, uphold your standards, and ensure that you are not overextending yourself for someone who hasn't earned that level of access to your heart. But they are not something that needs to be broadcasted. You don't need to explain why you stopped texting first. You don't need to justify why you needed space. You don't need to announce that you're observing how he handles conflict before getting more emotionally invested. Your energy will say all of that for you, and it will say it in a way that maintains respect and mystery, two elements that keep a man leaning in. There's a confidence in the woman who knows she's being intentional but doesn't need to make it obvious. She's not withholding affection out of fear. She's just pacing the relationship with wisdom. She's not making moves to get a reaction. She's making moves to stay aligned with her own values. And the man who's right for her won't need a playbook to follow. He'll feel the steadiness of her energy, the depth of her presence, and the natural flow of how she navigates the relationship. And because she's kept her strategy to herself, she leaves room for his authenticity to rise. That's when the relationship becomes not just a connection, but a mutual commitment built on something real.